Greetings, heroes. It is I, your friendly friendly neighborhood rabbi, John Carrier. And I'm super excited that people are joining me for this live stream. Today won't be a super duper long one, but I wanted to share some words of Torah here in the beginning of the week. And the words of Torah I have for you today comes from Parashat Ki Tissa, which means which is a parsha in the Torah. It's like when you take a tax, there's a tax involved. There's sort of a half shekel tax per head for the maintenance of the holy sanctuary and the holy service. But there's a lot of other stuff going on in this parsha as well. There's a calf made of gold, and that's kind of a no-no. But what I really want to talk about in this session is how to do something really, really scary. Before we get started, just want to give a shout out to some of my friends here, see if there's anybody joining us in the live chat. Let's see if I can find the live chat. People are so nice. Let's see. How can I chat? Okay. So we'll get that going. If you're able to join the live chat, please do, and I'll see if I can see you chatting with me. Before we get started, just want to give a shout out to some of my friends here, see if there's anybody. Okay. Now I'm starting like a real digital media professional. And I would love to, if anybody's out there, just chat at me, say, hey, John, hey, Rabbi, whatever. Let me know where you're coming in from. There's Ruthie, there's Milo. Some old friends are here with me. There is Whitney, I believe. Everybody say hello. Say where you're coming from. I'm going to say Burbank, California. Let's see. I got Burbank, California is here. So listen, this parsha is a tough one, right? Because God gets pretty upset about something. Moses gets pretty upset about something. There are some broken tablets. There's a little bit of a plague going around, and people getting killed. People who are not acting right. There's some consequences there. This is a parsha that really sets the standard for our value of not being idolatrous. Just to break it down for you, what happens is, we had the Ten Commandments a couple weeks ago, and God spoke super, super loudly and forcefully the first 10 commandments, and the people were like, okay, we'll do what you say, just please talk to Moses from now on, because this is really frightening for us. So if you wouldn't mind giving the rest of the Torah to Moses, that would be great. Moses goes up the mountain to get the rest of the Torah from God, including the first tablets of the commandments. And he's gone for quite some time. He's gone for like 40 days and 40 nights. I don't know if you've heard this story before. There's another place in the Torah where there's a 40-day and 40-night thing. Anybody, if you know the 40-day and 40-night thing, put in the chat for me. It was the last book, not the last parsha, but the last book, 40 days, 40 nights. Give me something to work with here. And there's a little bit of a time delay, so I'm not trying to belabor it. So if you know something else that happened for 40 days and 40 nights in the Torah, type that into the chat. Anyway, it was a really long time, and people were frankly nervous. I mean, just remember, this people had just left slavery, but it also means they just left everything that they knew. They were urban construction workers in Egypt, and they've been thrust into a new environment. They don't know where their livelihood is coming from. They're sort of taking it on faith that they're going to be sustained on this journey, and that their destination is actually going to be everything it's cracked up to be. And they've really had a lot of trust for not only God, but for God's servant, Moses. And Moses disappears, and God, from their perspective, sort of disappears with him, in the sense that he has been, God's been speaking to Moses, God's been doing some speaking to Aaron as well, and God is now having kind of a 40-day private conversation with Moses, and the people are sitting there, and it's been over a month, right? It hasn't been that long since they left Egypt, and now they've been without a leader for a month, and they had this great dramatic revelation from God, and then radio silence. And so they said, what are we going to do? Maybe, that was a pretty scary thing God did when God gave us the Ten Commandments. Maybe this frightening God got mad at Moses and killed him and is now peace out, is not talking to us anymore, right? Maybe we don't have a political leader, a military leader, a spiritual leader. I mean, we have, Aaron's going to be the spiritual leader there, but everything's just been on hold, right? And if you've been in these kind of group situations before, when there's nothing coming from the top, when there's no leadership happening, rumors start and fear starts and anxiety starts, and they're just trying to get through the day. And so they say, maybe we've been abandoned. Maybe we need to come up with a new focal point for our community. We need to come up with a new God to worship. So they passed the hat. They, got all this gold and stuff. We got the instructions for taking all the gold and the jewels and all the fancy stuff and making a sanctuary for God. But we just got the instructions. We haven't actually started building it yet. So we still have all this gold lying around. And they said, okay, what do we do in Egypt? Okay, let's just go back to basics. Let's go back to what we know. What did they do in Egypt? Well, they built a god, small g, an idol out of gold in the form of a calf, so that they could have this sort of focal point for their community. They had a location to put their anxiety, their supplication, their tshuva, what have you, whatever you point, at God, they're now pointing it at this inanimate object that they made. And God notices, and God gets terribly upset about this and says to Moses, look, this people has gone completely off the path. I think I've made a mistake here. Maybe I picked the wrong people to carry on this holy mission for me. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to wipe them all out and start with you, Moses. Right? God says, set aside. Don't try to stop me. I think we're in about Exodus chapter 32, verse in the teens, 14 maybe. God says, don't try to stop me. Just in case you were thinking of it, don't try to stop me. I'm going to wipe out all this people. I'm going to start over again with you and your family, and I'm going to make you into a great people, Moses. And Moses says no to God, right? Moses protests. Right? What the Yiddish word is chutzpah. What chutzpah is this? And I think a fancy English word for this is audacity, if you will. But chutzpah's got a little bit more of a backspin on it. I mean, this is I don't know a better word for that than chutzpah. He says, okay, God, how about no? How about you don't wipe out this? I mean, he was much more respectful than that, and I should be too. But he says, God, not for my sake, but for yours, pretty much, for your rep, right? The Egyptians will talk. The Egyptians will say, hey, you took these people out of Egypt and you couldn't sustain them in the wilderness. You just brought them out there to die. It was too much for you. Right? And and if it wasn't too much for you, what kind of God would do that? To take people out of slavery into freedom just to bury them in the desert. And so Moses said, look, for the sake of your relationship with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, please give this people, your people, a second chance. Now, I was talking to a professor, author, Professor Jack Wertheimer earlier this week for the Jew Curious Show podcast, and he reminded me of the word Amcha. And Amcha basically means Stam Yidden. It means just, regular folk, regular Jews, regular people. But even in this context where Moses says, okay, your people are acting up. And he's like, it's not like my people. It's like your people are acting up. But even these people that Moses agrees is difficult, stiff-necked is a word that they use, being very stubborn and forgetful too, apparently. Moses says, your people shouldn't be killed in the desert, right? And look, don't do this for me. That's very nice of you to offer to start over again with me, but don't do this for me. Do this for you, God. Do this for your relationship with their ancestors, Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, but most of all, do it for them. Give them a second chance. You knew who this people was when you took them out, right? And sure, there's going to be consequences, and man, is this a lesson we're not going to forget again anytime soon. But please, if you decide, and he jumps ahead a little bit, there's another moment where God gets mad again, and Moses said, look, if you're going to wipe them out, wipe me out first, right? Because if you think you're going to pick me to lead a new crop, I would rather not exist than lose this people who are very difficult, but I've had the charge and responsibility for since we left Egypt. And there's this really interesting word. It's like Yenachem, used in a couple of different contexts. The translation, this is what God does. And some places it says God repents, or God regrets even, or God goes back on what God has decided to do. And raises all sorts of questions because, hey, does God really regret something that God made up God's mind to do? Is God really changing God's mind? Or was this some sort of leadership test for Moses, right? God came all hot and heavy on this one, and Moses said, nope, please don't do that. Appealed to higher principles, appealed to God's reputation, appealed to the covenant. And maybe that's what God wanted to see Moses do before coming out with a real decision of sparing most of us. But what that comes to is what I wanted to teach today, and that is how to have faith when faith is hard. Or, maybe to put in a little bit more worldly terms, how to do something really, really scary. Because I tell you what, I cannot think of a thing that would be scarier than standing up to God at a moment where God's, got his justice out, if you will. The word wrath is thrown around quite a bit in archaic translations, right? God's in a wrathful mood, and you're saying, really? Can't we think about this? Maybe go a different way? That's chutzpah. Right, that is courage. And courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is feeling the fear, understanding the possible consequences, and acting anyway for a higher principle. And the rabbis see what Moses did, and there's this interesting midrash. I said there earlier, I don't know if anybody got my pop quiz. What's another thing that took 40 days and 40 nights? I'll give you a hint. It's been raining a lot here in California lately. Not for 40 days and 40 nights. We'll probably get like 10, 12 good days of rain, and that's called winter here. Sorry, East Coast. But there was rain for 40 days and 40 nights, and there was a guy with a boat and a bunch of animals and stuff, and his name was Noah. And the rabbis look at Noah, and they look at Moses, and they say, okay, who's better? This is like their brackets, their final four or something. Like who's going to win in a face-off between, like a righteousness, holiness face-off between Noah and Moses? And they say, well, Moses is clearly on a higher plane than Noah. I mean, Noah was, Noah had a hard row to hoe. I mean, to be the one good guy in a world full of bad guys, the rabbis elsewhere give Noah a lot of credit for being able to be righteous in the context of such unrighteousness, let's say. But they said Moses was clearly on a higher plane than Noah, because Noah saved himself and saved his family and saved, the entire animal kingdom, but not his people. And Moses was able to save his people. Not by arguing for himself and say, hey, wouldn't it be nice if the other people could come along too? But he said, if you're going to wipe them out, wipe me out first. Right? And the rabbis in a midrash compare these to two ship's captains, and one of them was actually a ship's captain. But it compares this to two ship captains who both hit an iceberg or have trouble at sea, and one is the captain who's able to save himself but not his crew. And then there's the captain who's able to save himself by putting his crew first. And Moses is like this second captain. And stories are fun, scary, like, Stone Age, Wrathful God stuff is fun to talk about. But what the heck does that have to do with my life? Where this hits me at home is remembering the times when I've had to do something I was terrified of, right? Get up and give a speech, do some fundraising in the synagogue and ask the Jewish Federation for a grant, or ask somebody for a donation or something. That's scary stuff to do. And when I thought of myself, I thought, well, I don't know if I have the strength to do this. But when I remembered that I wasn't doing it for me, it didn't get easy, but it got easier, right? So my advice to you is, if you have something really hard to do or really scary to do in the coming week, in the coming year, and some decision you're making right now, I want you to think, how is this thing going to benefit someone else? Because it's almost kind of a hack. It's kind of a trick. Like, if you can make that thing about somebody else, suddenly it magically gets a lot easier. And when I say a hack and a trick, I don't mean in like a dishonest way, because it should legitimately benefit someone else. But I'll bet you, if you can find a way to act for the sake of someone else instead of for your own sake, that barrier gets lower. You feel stronger. And you might even have the courage, like someone who stood up to God. And so, for just one more time to take it home, for this week, when you think about something scary that you have to do, when you think about something that you're afraid to do, if you can see how it benefits other people and not just you, it can give you more strength. It can make the barrier look smaller. And it could make a tremendous difference in somebody else's life, right? And at the end of the day, you could be like, okay, I thought that thing was scary. Turned out to be not that scary, but man, did it really help somebody else. And at the end of the day, it wasn't even about that scary thing. It was about the benefit that I was able to give to this person or these people. And so I really appreciate your learning this Torah with me this week. This is where the Parsha comes home to me, if you will. And I'm always trying to give things that you could use in your daily life, and it doesn't seem a little bit, outdated and weird as some people think the Torah is. I find it to be completely the opposite of that. But God bless you. If you're doing anything scary, know that if you do it for somebody else, it'll be a little easier. If you can do it with somebody else, even easier still. So every week, just for example, I get to teach the Parashat Hashavua inside the Jew Curious School, and it's a little bit like what we're doing right now. But it's a bit more in depth, and I bring the different sources and the Hebrew text and the commentary and things like that, and we get together and we talk about it, and we can talk about it in the community forum, and that way people can share their ideas with each other, and I think that's great. That's a great way to learn Torah with another person. But what I found is, once people know each other through study, that community has an added benefit of people supporting each other in each other's spiritual path. And saw something in the communities today where somebody was a little bit anxious about trying something, but then people said, you know what? We're not going to tell you not to be scared, because that almost never works. I've seen a lot of horror movies. Telling people not to be scared never works. But when you show up and say, look, I'm scared too, but we're not alone, that gives people the courage to do great things. And so if you want to do some learning with me, I've had the links all over this video, other ways to connect with me. If you like this kind of live learning and you want to keep doing it with me, a great way to connect to it is, there is a guide that I have, the 3 things Jew Curious people need to upgrade your Jewish learning experience. If you want to download that guide, if you haven't already, then you get connected into, I send out bulletins as to when I'm going to be doing these live videos, and I would love to learn this stuff with you live. For fans of the Jew Curious Show podcast, I just had the most dope conversation with one Sarah Klegman, who's involved in all sorts of great stuff, including Challah Hub, or is it Challah Hub or Challah Hub? But anyway, we had a great conversation. You'll be hearing more from her next week, I think. Maybe the end of this week, next week. We'll see. And then another couple of great episodes I have with Rabbi Brad Hirschfield, author of You Don't Have to Be Wrong for Me to Be Right, and Professor Jack Wertheimer, author of The New American Judaism, which is a fascinating book talking about changes in the Jewish world in America and reasons for great hope for the Jewish community in the future. So I'm going to just check the chat real quick. I see Catherine, California. I see Fullerton, California. I see Florida. I see Denmark. I see all sorts of great people learning with me today. A good approach to think of others in a scary situation. Because here's the thing, y'all. If you're scared, think of everybody else there is probably scared too. And so if you can say like, look, I'm scared too, but we are in this together, that makes both of you slightly less scared, or at least more confident in the ability to deal with the situation. So I want to thank everybody for joining me for this learning. There's all sorts of ways you can connect with me if you've seen other links on this video. And we're going to be back at you tomorrow with another topic. Just check my YouTube channel for the topic that's coming up. And I think I've got something every single day this week that we can learn together live, have a Q&A, throw the Q's in there, I'll throw the A's right back at you. Or if you want to connect with me one-on-one in private, go to my Facebook page and PM me. Until next time, heroes, peace.